So let's put this code of conduct to use. Let's talk about how we might address a problem at work. So let's say a family asks the teacher in their child's classroom to help them find a child care subsidy, right? So that's the issue. So a problem doesn't have to be like a problem. It can just be an issue. So a family comes to you and asks you to help them find a child care subsidy. So a different governmental program that can help reduce the cost of child care, which can be very expensive for families. So the first thing we have to ask ourselves is, does it involve ethics? So if it doesn't involve ethics, we have to seek an appropriate solution. So this case does involve ethics. There is a duty, there is an obligation, right? So as a teacher, I have a duty and an obligation to help my families find resources that help make childcare more attainable. So it does involve ethics. And then we have to ask ourselves, is it a legal responsibility? Does the situation involve a legal responsibility? So if I don't help the family provide, get a subsidy, or find how to get a subsidy, or if I give them outdated information, that I don't go to jail for that. I'm not going to lose my job because of that. I'm not going to be an ethical professional, certainly, but I'm not going to go to jail. So it does involve ethics, but it's not a legal responsibility. Then I have to ask myself, is it an ethical responsibility? And in this case it is. Yes, I have an ethical responsibility to this family to help them locate resources to find childcare subsidies. So I have to do what's right. So I have to maybe go to my center director and ask for forms, or I have to do a little bit of research if I don't know where to point them to directly. If I don't have a website, on hand, just to give the family, and then I can follow up with them. I can ask them, if they need any help, particularly if it's a family that maybe is not proficient in English, or the way that, those forms might be complicated for the family. I might offer them help, or if my child care program has a social worker or a family worker, I can put them in touch with that resource. So helping a family find a child care subsidy is my ethical responsibility. It's not a legal obligation, but it does involve ethics. But it isn't a dilemma. So a dilemma is a little bit different than a responsibility. So if it's a legal responsibility, like identifying child abuse, for example. So if I suspect child abuse, if I even suspect it, I have a legal responsibility to follow the law and report it. No questions, right? So if I don't report child abuse, the child can be harmed or even killed, which is the whole point of why we protect our children from abuse. And also, there are legal repercussions for the teacher. You can get a second-degree misdemeanor. You go to jail, pay a fine. If you're found that you were aware of child abuse and you did not report it, right? So that's a legal responsibility. An ethical responsibility is a responsibility that I have ethically to the profession. So it's either I have, remember those 4 standards that the code covers? So do I have a responsibility to children? I have a responsibility to families, I have a responsibility to coworkers, and I have a responsibility to the community. So if there's values and obligations and duties that I hold as a professional to any of those groups of people, then I have to do what is right. It might not be a legal issue, but I have to do what is right professionally. An ethical dilemma is a little different. An ethical dilemma is when there are conflicting obligations. So, for example, an ethical dilemma might be, let me see. Okay, an ethical dilemma might be like this. A child's mother asks that her daughter not be allowed to play in the sandbox because she gets sand in her braids. Her teacher knows the benefits of sand play and doesn't want to exclude her. So let me read that again. A child's mother asks that her daughter not be allowed to play in the sandbox because she gets sand in her braids. Her teacher knows the benefit of sand play and doesn't want to exclude her. So let's see, does this involve ethics? Yes, it does, right? Because it involves professional obligations. It involves value of developmentally appropriate practice, respecting families, child growth and development. It does concern the profession. So is it a legal responsibility? Will I go to jail or sued if I let the child play in the sandbox or if I keep the child out of the sandbox? No, it is not a legal responsibility. Is it an ethical responsibility? Well, it is, but to whom, right? So that's where the dilemma comes in. I have conflicting responsibilities. So in this scenario, remember those 4 areas: children, family, coworker, community. I have a conflicting obligation to the child, doing what is in that child's best interest of growth and development and playing with their friends. And then I have a conflicting obligation to families. Right, I should respect the family's wishes. What they're asking for is not illegal, right? They're not asking me to starve the child or put the child in solitary confinement if they're bad, in school. That's something that's a little extreme, but it paints the issue where like, well, I don't really have to take you up on that advice, and perhaps we need to have a conversation about the way you work with your own child. But this dilemma of do I let the child play in the sand or do I keep the child out of the sand? I have conflicting obligations, so I have to decide what's right. So I go back to the code, I look under the section for children, I try to find either a principle or an ideal how that I can use to say, no, I should do what's in the child's best interest. Then I look at the code and I look under the principles and ideals of my commitment to families. And I understand in professional language what I should do with this family's wishes. And then we start to decide what we could do, what can happen. So perhaps in this case, we can have a conversation with the family where we talk about the child's growth and development and the benefit of sand play, particularly if the child really enjoys it. You would hate to see her lose that, but it's more than just that. We can talk about math concepts, science concepts, language development, and plus it's just plain old fun. But also, if a family is taking time to braid their hair, that child's hair, it doesn't give any indication of race or ethnicity, but if that child has kinky or coarse hair, that can take time to work on a hairstyle. That isn't just something lickety-split that just you roll out of bed and poof, it's done. So, sand in their hair, for any hair texture can be problematic because you definitely have to wash it every night, get it out. But for certain types of hair, it's more problematic than others. So how can we solve this issue? So a simple solution might be to suggest if the child wears a shower cap while they play with the sand, that way, and then the teacher can monitor. Maybe we can try that. And if the child can get benefit from playing with their friends and keep the sand out of their hair, we've just solved their ethical dilemma. So usually it's a little bit of problem solving, a little bit of discussion with the parties involved, and we can come to a solution where we can hopefully mitigate and both parties' desires can be solved.